I find it so helpful to use tools like Myers-Briggs and DISC profiles to better understand myself and my team members. Now, wouldn't it be nice if there was a tool that could help us understand our collective team style and preferences? Well, today's guest has created just that, and he's here to explain the 4 dimensions of team dynamics and how we can leverage this understanding to improve our teamwork. Today's guest is Christopher Morrison. Christopher is the co-founder of TeamDynamics, a pioneering platform designed to optimize team collaboration by providing actionable insights into team dynamics. With a rich background in top consulting firms like McKinsey and extensive experience in technology startups, Christopher developed TeamDynamics to address the limitations of traditional personality tests. His innovative framework, grounded in research and practical experiments, focuses on key dimensions of team interaction to enhance organizational performance and foster successful collaborative teams. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I share new episodes and other tips for managers every week. Now, here's the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today, Christopher. I am super excited to talk about the Team Dynamics report and the model that you have. It was, as someone who loves Myers-Briggs, I was so excited to see the Myers-Briggs for teams. So I'm really, really, really excited to dive in. So welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Mamie.
All right. Why don't you just explain, what is this Team Dynamics thing that you put together? How did it kind of come about? What's the grounding for it? And then maybe walk us through the different components of it. And then we'll get into the meat.
My journey to starting Team Dynamics and building, what is in a lot of ways, as you put it, the MBTI for teams, ties together a bunch of different threads from my background. So I started my career at McKinsey, which is a big management consultancy. A great leadership training ground. And one of the foundational lessons I took from my time at McKinsey is the power of a simple framework. McKinsey is legendary for their frameworks, to the point of it being a little bit of a joke. But there's a reason for it. The world is complicated and we need a simple way to make sense of it. And a good framework takes something that's complicated and distills it down into its essential components, so it makes it actionable. And McKinsey was also my first exposure to the power of culture and how true it is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. That is a business truism. It's a trope, but it's true. We would spend months and months working with our clients to craft the perfect strategy for this, that, or the other, launching a new product, international expansion, what have you. But when I reflect on my time there and the dozens of projects I led and did, what separates the projects with real impact from the rest was the culture of the place that we were working with. Were they actually capable of taking an idea and turning it into a reality? And so after 5 years at McKinsey, I had the opportunity to join a pre-revenue technology startup out here in San Francisco called Doma as its founding chief operating officer. And over the course of my 5-year run there, I took that organization from 5 people squatting over the Sweetgreen salad shop in Soma here in downtown San Francisco to a little over $500 million in revenue, so around $550 million in revenue, 2,000 employees, and ultimately an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange. And, leading through that rapid growth taught me a number of things, but it emphasized for me the truth of the saying that you can't manage what you can't measure. And, that is also a little bit of an overused, piece of business dogma, but it is true, figuring out the right things to measure, getting an accurate read on them and staying focused on them is so important for getting an organization aligned and accountable for moving towards its goals. And, I also learned how different it feels to be leading a team or be part of a team that's really humming versus one that's just okay. As a leader, it's the difference between feeling like anything is possible, because in a lot of ways on a high performing team, it is, and feeling like you're stuck in neutral, constantly putting out little fires, never really moving the ball forward. And I gained an appreciation for how hard it is to get teamwork right. I felt like I was always testing and learning different team norms, routines, documents, et cetera. It felt a little bit like I was shooting in the dark. I found myself often correcting breakdowns, sometimes within, but more often across different teams. I was also always onboarding and recruiting, new team members. When you're building, an organization, recruiting and hiring is one of the most important and most time-consuming things, that you do. And so after I took my company public, I stepped back from my role and I took about 6 months to reflect on what I learned, some of the challenges I'd had and what I might do about them. This was also candidly like one of the first times in my career when I'd had the time to start talking to other founders and senior executives about their experiences. And people's circumstances are unique. This person might be closing a round of funding, this one might be launching a new product, but on the short list of everyone's biggest challenges as well as biggest opportunities are their people. Who's on their team for sure, but also how that team is working. And I realized that one of the glaringly obvious things that is missing in the leader's toolkit is a framework to measure and therefore better manage teamwork. Basically applying the simplicity of a McKinsey framework to enable leaders to define and manage that fuzzy, but it when you see it and when you feel it thing that is teamwork. And by the way, when I say teamwork, I don't mean the flow of tasks. There's tons of project management techniques and software for that, but I mean the interactions within and between teams. And so that's really what TeamDynamics is. It's an easy to use tool to assess and categorize a team's behaviors along the most important dimensions of teamwork, which we can get into, in a second if it's interesting. But basically how it works is you invite your whole team. Individuals submit their responses to our proprietary survey instrument. It's really easy. It's mobile friendly. You can take it over the coffee, on the bus, what have you. We analyze their responses along with those of of their teammates. And we then deliver back to the team a quantitative assessment of how that team works along the 4 key dimensions of teamwork, how each individual relates to their team, and a set of recommendations tailored to both the team as a whole and individuals within that team. And leaders find this helpful for a couple of different reasons. The first is it takes something that can seem a little squishy, quote unquote, how we work, and it makes it concrete. Each team falls into one of 16 different team types or team personalities, which makes it a whole lot easier to describe, discuss, and therefore improve your team dynamics. The second thing that people find helpful is when you deploy team dynamics across an organization, so not just in one team, but across many different teams, it establishes a shared language that you can use as a bit of a shorthand when you're welcoming someone new to a team, when you're working cross-functionally, when you're resolving inter-team conflicts. For example, if that the product marketing team is super organized in how they share information and approach projects, but the engineering team is more ad hoc in both. Well, as a manager, you can devise strategies proactively to try to get ahead of some of the frictions or tensions that might result. And you also have, some tools in your toolkit if and when, problems do arise as these teams, work together. And then the last thing that people find, really helpful is using TeamDynamics as a tool for coaching and developing individuals. We don't just analyze a team's behaviors. We also analyze how each individual relates to their team. Do they naturally fit with their team's behaviors? Are they in tension with certain dimensions of their team dynamics? And knowing what those points of tension and alignment are really helps team leaders better coach their teams to both improve personal performance and, devise strategies to better manage stress and boost satisfaction among team members. So that's a little bit about, team dynamics. I'd be happy to, share sort of what those dimensions are, some of the research that we've done, et cetera, but helpful just to ground in sort of how it came to be and, what it is and what people use it for.
Yeah, I love this. And I would love to just keep going right into those different dynamics, and then we can get into more later.
The very first thing that we did when we started TeamDynamics was a meta study on the social science that's been done over the past really 50 years on the topic of teamwork. And, one of the foundational insights that has come out of this research is that behavioral patterns, teams have behavioral patterns that can't be explained by the personalities of the people on the team. That sounds complicated, but basically what it means is that just like us as individuals, teams have their own personalities. And so, yes, it's useful to know what the personality types, like let's say, for example, the MBTI types are of everybody on a team, but that doesn't actually give you much in the way of insight into how that team is going to work together. The team has its own emergent properties that are distinct from the ways of working and the preferences of the individuals on the team. And the other thing that came out of this, research is that team personality is hugely important, both for driving team performance and also job satisfaction of individuals on a team. So after we did that research, we said, okay, what are the elements of a team's personality? How do we build a simple, intuitive framework that we can then measure teams against so that we can put some structure around this concept of, hey, what is it? What does teamwork really mean? For anyone who's listening, or watching and wants a sneak preview of your team dynamics that will cost you absolutely nothing as we go through this, just ask yourself two questions. Number one, which of these behaviors sounds more like my team? And number two, as an individual, which of these ways of working feels more natural to me? And that'll give you a little bit of a preview for not only what your team dynamics are, but also how you relate to those team dynamics. Let me go through the different dimensions of team dynamics and maybe stop me at any point if you want more detail or want to ask questions. The first dimension is communicating. And this is how a team shares information. And teams are either ordered or informal. So an ordered team is one that has defined processes and forums for sharing information. Think about internal documentation, think about recurring meetings with defined agendas, Slack channels or Microsoft Team channels that are organized by topic, that sort of thing. On the other end of the spectrum, an informal team is one that surfaces and shares information much more organically. One-off conversations, lightweight, maybe non-existent meeting agendas, information and expertise that's mostly living in people's, individuals' minds versus in sort of defined and organized team documentation. The second dimension is processing. This is how teams turn raw information into actionable insights. And teams are either logical or relational. So a logical team is one that's going to rely on a bunch of data, rigorous analysis when it comes time to make sense of information. The argument that carries the day on a logical team tends to be the one that's most rigorously researched and supported by the facts. And there's a general skepticism of gut feel or instinct. But on the other end of the spectrum, a relational team looks to specific trusted individuals on the team to tell them what's going on and what matters. And these are teams that have a habit of socializing analysis ahead of decision points, so running it by key individuals on the team for their input and buy-in. And there's a lot of emphasis put on the value of expertise, organizational context, relationship capital. It's better to have a team's respect on a relational team than it is to necessarily always be right or have the best analysis. The third dimension of team dynamics is deciding. This was pretty intuitive. It's basically how teams align on what they're going to do. And teams are either authoritative or concordant. An authoritative team, the shorthand here is this is a top-down team. This is a team that looks to its leaders to act decisively and set the team's directions. Decisions, generally made by team leaders or maybe a small group of team members appointed by the leader to make a decision on a specific topic. Not a lot of input needed from throughout the team before making a decision, and often not a ton of transparency around how decisions get made. The opposite of this is a concordant team. You can think about this as a consensus-driven team. These teams collect input from everyone before making a decision. They consider a variety of different perspectives. Deliberation is the name of the game here, and transparency and that deliberation is kind of key to getting things done. You need that broad-based buy-in when it comes time to make a decision. And the last dimension of team dynamics is executing. And this is how teams plan and work towards their goals. And teams along this dimension are either deliberate or spontaneous. So a deliberate team creates detailed implementation plans. They closely follow those. They diligently maintain them. Kind of the classic behavior of a deliberate team is when they're working on a project and something unexpected happens, the first instinct is to go back to the original project plan and say, hey, why didn't we anticipate this? Why didn't we think of this, as a possibility? But on the other end of the spectrum is the spontaneous team. And that's a team that stays responsive to new information. Lightweight plans that the spontaneous team is comfortable quickly tossing aside in the face of new information or changing circumstances. These are teams that move immediately from decision to action. They don't need to take a lot of time building a detailed implementation plan. They can just get right down to doing. And, the team opts to kind of figure it out as we go, much more comfortable in an iterative testing and learning approach to executing on a plan. And zooming out, if we take these four dimensions together, they basically capture the entire life cycle of how teamwork happens on a modern team. So communicating and processing those first two dimensions, that's all about how teams gather and interpret information. Deciding and executing those third and fourth dimensions get at the core of how teams turn insights into action. And then that feeds right back into that information gathering and interpretation stage.
Amazing. All right. I have two maybe just like logistical framing questions here. The first is, are all of the dimensions, like are either side of the spectrum, are they equally good? Like if we are on one side or the other side, does it really not matter as long as we know which side we're on? Is the first question. And then second, relatedly, is there a spectrum between the poles, or is it kind of you're on one side or the other?
Absolutely. Teams exist along a spectrum. When we analyze a team's results, we actually share kind of where you are along the spectrum between those two poles, along each of those different dimensions. And that's really helpful for a couple of reasons. The first is it gives you as a team an understanding of your degree of flexibility along this particular dimension. How comfortable are you flexing from one side to the other? If you're really far out on one side of the spectrum, it's going to be a little bit more challenging for you when you're working with a team that behaves on another end of the spectrum, or when you're working with individuals on your team who are much more comfortable behaving on the other end of the spectrum. But if you're closer to the middle, your preferences aren't as strongly expressed. Like you're able to sort of flex across both. So yes, absolutely, teams exist along a spectrum, just as, in the case of, for example, Myers-Briggs, you exist along a spectrum across each of the different dimensions there. The first question you asked, the other question you asked is, are there better or worse team dynamics? And the short answer is no. One of the important things about the team dynamics framework, and this is being borne out in, our research, is, there's no correct team type. Now, that's not to say that there might not be situations where certain teams are better suited for the task at hand or more comfortable pursuing a specific, course of action. But that isn't to say that, teams can't be successful in any circumstance with any team type. But what is really important is understanding your team's type, leveraging its natural tendencies and strengths, knowing what those are, and being mindful also of where your blind spots are, so that hey, this is a situation where we're just like naturally aligned with the circumstance that, we're faced, or hey, this is a situation where we need to flex a little bit outside of our comfort zone. I think the way to think about team dynamics is it's a little bit like having an instruction manual for your team. This is how we work. This is how the team works. And so I, as a leader, know how to manage my team effectively. And as an individual, I know how to fit in.
I would love to hear a story, maybe from your own team or from one of your clients, about how learning this information helped them. And then what did they do with it? And kind of what were the results of making those changes?
One of the fun things about building team dynamics, one of the fun things about building any product is releasing it out into the world and seeing how different organizations use it. We've been really lucky. We've only been around for, 12, 18 months or so, but we've been lucky to work with a really wide range of organizations, so like technology companies like Meta, Jabra, hospitality and travel companies like Hilton, Hawaiian Airlines, retailers like Walmart, nonprofits, educational institutions, et cetera. And it's really fun seeing the various ways that they use team dynamics, the problems that they're trying to solve, some of sort of the different sources of impact that this framework and this product can have. Just last week, the digital user research team of a major U.S. retailer used team dynamics to get ready for an offsite that they were holding. This was a cross-functional team, and they were looking to define a new team charter. Basically, they weren't happy with how they were working together, some of their working norms, and they wanted to overhaul them. And team dynamics basically gave them a shared language for their behavior so they could define concrete actions they could take to grow and develop as a group. Basically say, hey, look, like this is how we're behaving. Is this working for us? Should we be making adjustments, to the way that we're working some of our routines and habits as a team to better align with our team dynamics and, adjust to fit the circumstances of what we're being asked to do. I'm in the midst of working with the finance organization. So a variety of different teams within, a broader organization of a global luxury auto company to help them understand the differences between each of their teams. So basically their goal is, hey, we're trying to improve our cross-functional collaboration, and having sort of this team dynamics framework, this language, this, analytical tool for understanding how the various teams work has really helped them zero in on the points of alignment and some of the points of friction that they're having as they work cross-functionally. And, the goal there is to better help them coordinate and collaborate across teams, working cross-functionally, one of the really interesting things that we're finding there is it's been really helpful for them as they work within their sort of functional group. So that's 7 different teams within one organization, but they're obviously part of a much broader organization based in Italy, right? And so they're saying, hey, the next step is to take this and roll it out more broadly so that it's not just about improving sort of the cross-functional collaboration within our organization, but within the broader company as a whole. So that's been really interesting. Yeah. And then I guess just looking for sort of different examples, the last one I would point to is, the employee resource group for women in leadership at a really big tech company based out here in the Bay was trying to help team members better understand the similarities and differences that they were having when leading their different teams. And so this was a couple of dozen different leaders. And what was interesting about this was, these were individuals who didn't work together on a daily basis. Like this is an employee resource group that's meeting every month, to sort of help each other be the best versions of themselves as they, grow and develop as leaders. And so what we did there was rather than analyzing their results as a group, that wouldn't really be relevant. They don't work together on a daily basis. We had each of the members of this employee resource group, so a couple dozen different people, take sort of our individual product where they just reflected on working with their teams and then bring those individual results back together to look at some of the patterns that they were seeing across their various teams throughout the organization and see how they can, better support one another as leaders. And look, I think the common thread here is let's take something that can seem sort of vague, like this notion of like teamwork, and turn it into something specific, something tangible, something measurable, and therefore make it actionable so that teams can work better together, individuals can better relate to their teams, and leaders can better manage their teams.
One of the things that was really interesting in the report that I read was that managers don't have as much influence on the team's working style than we might think. And it's interesting because so much of culture often gets set by the tone of the leader. So I'm wondering, what do you attribute that difference to? Or maybe you kind of explain that difference I'm speaking to, and then what are you guys attributing it to?
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that many people, I suppose, assume is that a team's behavior is fundamentally down to the preferences of the manager of that team. And our research shows that isn't actually the case. I'm forgetting the statistic off the top of my head, but I think it's something like only 1 in 10 managers have individual preferences that align perfectly with their team's behaviors. And what that basically tells us is a manager's preferences, they maybe matter a little bit in terms of how that team is behaving, but they certainly don't define it entirely. Therefore, the team's personality, the team's behaviors is down to other things. And I think there's a variety of different ingredients that go into this. Manager preference matters a little bit, though not nearly as much as you might think. I already mentioned, one of the things that was originally thought like 50 years ago was that a team's personality was entirely defined by the personalities of the people on the team. That matters, but that's not the whole story. Other things matter too. The organizational context, like what sort of stage the organization as a whole is in. Is it in growth mode? Is it stagnant? Like what's happening in the broader organization? That matters. What's the organization's culture? So what are the broader norms that exist throughout the organization that the team, exists within? Even what the team is working on and what other teams the team is, interacting with or working cross-functionally with can also play a role in sort of defining the team's team dynamics. And these things are also not static. I mean, these things change over time. A team's composition changes. A team's manager changes. What the team is working on changes. And having a framework that allows you to understand where you stand right now as a team is so helpful for, as a leader, knowing how best to support, motivate, get the most out of your team and make sure that you're delivering, the right experience for the people that you're leading. That was one of the insights when we looked at at all of the data that we've collected, and said, hey, what are the sort of anonymized themes that we can pull out of this? Yeah, that was one of the ones that had my jaw a little bit on the floor, because think about all the things that people say. People don't leave companies; they leave managers. It's like so there's so much emphasis put on the manager, but in this particular instance, in terms of how the team works, like the manager is only one piece of the puzzle defining that team's behaviors.
Yeah, it's really interesting in that, as a manager, we may or may not like the way that our team shares information, right? It may or may not work for us, but if it works for the majority of our team, we have to kind of go with it. But then on the flip side, right, if you learn this about your team, if you go through the assessment and you kind of know where your team is at, then it's almost as if you're now saying, okay, but we can be better. Like, where do we need to make shifts? So how do you know when, like, how much of getting this knowledge is just like, okay, well, now that we are aware, we can be thoughtful about what this means for us. And when is it like, you know what, we are on the informal side of communication and maybe that's not working for us. But obviously somehow it became our natural tendency, whether it's because of the way that our organization works or because of the way that our team came together. But we actually need to shift. We're recognizing that this isn't working for us. So I guess what I'm asking is kind of like, how do you know when it's just, okay, great, information, helpful, good. And how do you know when it's like, this information is helpful, but we actually have to make that move. We need to kind of go from where we are and push ourselves along the spectrum one way or the other.
Yeah. So, one of the things that you get as a manager of a team when you use Team Dynamics, with your group is you get a manager report that has anonymized insights around how aligned as individuals people on your team are with your team's behaviors. So let's say your team is informal, but you look at this manager report and it says, hey, like 6 out of 7 people on our team are in tension with that team behavior. That can serve as a bit of a signal. Hey, like this is a thing that we should at least open for discussion. The second thing, that you get when you get your, Team Dynamics results, in addition to sort of a personal report, is you get a 25-page presentation that you can use basically out of the box as a team leader to facilitate a team conversation. I mean, it can take as little as 45 minutes, but I mean, you could comfortably fill, 90 if you'd like, where you go through your Team Dynamics results, you go through your team behaviors, you get a series of recommendations around how you could improve along those dimensions. But you're also prompted with a series of discussion questions to sort of say, hey, is this working for us? Are there circumstances where this works better or, less well? And this is where, having that team conversation with the benefit of an understanding of sort of where you sit in this framework, having that team conversation allows you to be intentional around how your team is actually working. It's no longer amorphous. This is like, hey, look, like this is exactly how we're behaving. Is this working for us? If so, great. Is this not working for us? If not, why? And are there circumstances where we need to be more mindful and proactive and sort of flexing, our behaviors as a team? And just on that last point, people often ask me, hey, like, what are the things that a leader really needs to think about? And I think that flexibility is a really important leadership competency. There is no single best way for a team to work together. It's a function, like I've said, of who's on the team, what the team is tasked with, the broader organizational context, et cetera. And, what we've seen is that high performing teams, they know how they prefer to work. So they know what their team dynamics are. They know what their individual preferences are, but they also know when and how to flex outside their comfort zone. And the leaders of these teams play an outsized role in setting this tone, saying, hey, look, like this particular project that we're tackling, this isn't a great fit for us. Maybe we really like to build, we like really detailed, rigorous, logical analysis. And we're very deliberate in how we execute projects. We like to build detailed implementation plans. But guess what? There's no information available for us to analyze. And we don't really know what the future holds here. Like we need to be much more iterative. We need to adopt a test and learn more spontaneous way of executing. And equipping leaders with the knowledge and then equipping the entire team with sort of the framework to think about and manage through a situation like that is super helpful in actually helping the team not only succeed, but also feel comfortable as it flexes outside of its comfort zone.
I'm so glad that you raised that because it feels like this, as you said, is where the manager actually does play an outsized role, right? To be able to push the team to work in different ways given the context and the situation. And knowing what your team prefers and knowing what's needed is a skill that managers need to develop. And then the capability to motivate and kind of shift the behaviors to the team when it might feel uncomfortable or different is kind of the second part of that skill. So thank you for raising that. Now you're out of time though. So, Christopher, can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
I had the good fortune of working with a lot of talented managers in the past. One really stands out. This guy, a gentleman by the name of Dan McCarthy. He's gone on to, he and I worked together when I was like 23. He's gone on to have a, great career in health technology. He's got a big job now. I think Dan did a lot of things really well, but what sticks with me to this day and what I've, tried to carry forward are really two things. First is Dan has a great sense of humor. Dan had this way of taking things seriously without being too serious, if that makes any sense. He's quick to joke, quick to laugh. And that went a long way towards just making like work fun. And then I think the second thing that Dan did an outstanding job of was he projects this aura of like psychological safety. I don't really know how else to put it. Like you felt almost invincible when you were working with Dan. And so you felt comfortable taking risks, trying new things, because Dan always made you feel like things were going to be okay, that the broader team, sort of had your back. And, so as a result, like working with Dan, I really felt like anything was possible. And I knew I'd have a ton of fun along the way. And, that's a feeling I've just always tried to replicate on my teams.
Amazing. And where can people learn more about you and Team Dynamics?
So the best place to learn more about TeamDynamics is on our website, which is www.teamdynamics.io. We've got a ton of information about the Team Dynamics framework there. We've got information on all of the 16 different Team Dynamics types, for example. We've got a free rapid result. You can take a free trial and get sort of a directional indication of your team's type in just a minute or two. We've also got lots of free team building resources that you can use and that you can download and use with your team. And you can also email us at hello@teamdynamics.io. And feel free to drop me a line, Christopher@teamdynamics.io, or look me up on LinkedIn. I'd be thrilled to connect.
Fabulous. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today. I feel like we could go so deep on all of this, and we just didn't have enough time.
Well, this was really fun. I too can go for hours and hours, so maybe we'll have to continue the conversation another time.